Secondly, all things work for the salvation of God's people. So why should we love providence? Not only accept it as true, but love it? Because God is providentially working all things out for our salvation. We heard that in Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. We mentioned before, Genesis 50 verse 20, where Joseph said, "All the things you did to me were meant for evil, but God meant it for good, for the saving of many lives." That's a picture of how all things in providence work for the salvation of the saints of God. Now, we don't know how that works. We don't know how a coin toss or the direction, the side that a piece of toast lands on, we don't know how that works out for our salvation, but God says it does. All things work together for our salvation. And this is illustrated even in Hollywood attempts. There have been many movies which have toyed with the idea that if you change one little thing in history, then the whole rest of history is changed. Two things come to mind: A Wonderful Life, which probably many of us have seen, how a few slight changes means a totally different outcome. Of course, that the producers may not understand God's providence, but they're helping us to understand that even tiny things work in God's plan for our good. Or a movie we watched recently, Jumanji, which has just slight changes in history, changing history. Now, we know that God's plan is not changeable, but the point is little things work out for our salvation. We don't know exactly how, but I'd like to explain it this way. Every event in history is part of God's puzzle of providence. Every event in history is part of God's puzzle of providence. The puzzle isn't complete without even the littlest piece. You know how aggravating it is to put a puzzle together, and you get to the last piece, and where's the piece? And maybe somebody's hid it, and maybe somebody's playing a prank, but if you can't find it, it's really aggravating, right? It's very important, even the littlest piece. Well, every event in history is a piece of God's puzzle of providences. Let me ask you even more pointedly to consider this. How many events had to happen in order for you to come to a knowledge of your sin and of salvation in Jesus Christ? Now, you can't answer that, of course. I can't answer that. But just think for a moment. What had to take place in order for you to get to that worship service where that sermon worked in your heart? We don't know, but there's a number of things that took place for that to happen. How many things had to work out just perfectly so that the gospel would come into your family, into your church? There are many churches today where the gospel isn't preached, and in any number of churches today, people are going to church and not hearing the gospel. Why here? God's providence. Why is it that you were raised in a faith community and not somewhere else where Christ's name is not heard? Just think about all of the events of history that have been working themselves out for your salvation. That's providence. And that's something that we need to embrace and love. So there's no chance, but rather God is working out a divine program to save our souls.